My parents left me at a gas station as a joke. Let's see how long it takes them to get home. I never went back. 20 years later, they finally found me. This morning, 39 missed calls. Before we begin the story, take a moment to support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Your support means the world to our channel and helps us spread more shocking true stories to light. Now, let's get started. They left me at a gas station, and I never went back. I never planned to tell this story. Honestly, I thought I had buried it so deep that it would never see the light of day again. But then, last night, I stumbled across a TikTok, some video about parents teaching their kids life lessons in harsh ways. And something inside me just snapped. I'm 36 now. It's been 2 decades, but I can still smell the gasoline, still feel the thick, humid summer air pressing against my skin from that day. The day my parents decided to turn me into a joke. Gerald and Denise, that's what I call them now, not mom and dad, were obsessed with tough love. Every mistake was an opportunity for a life lesson. Every misstep a chance to make me stronger. Forgot to mow the lawn? That meant getting yanked out of bed at 3 a.m. to do it in the dark. Missed the school bus? Too bad. Guess I was walking, rain or shine, even if Denise was already driving that way. They thought they were making me independent. In reality, they were just breaking me down one lesson at a time. That July morning started like any other. We were on our way back from visiting my older sister, Valerie, at college, a 4-hour drive. I was in the back seat, half asleep, my iPod humming in my ears. Dad pulled off the highway to get gas at some middle-of-nowhere station, the kind of place where the air smelled like asphalt and old coffee. "Travis, go grab me a coffee," Dad barked from the driver's seat, shoving some crumpled bills into my hand. I sighed, but I went. The gas station was nearly empty, and the cashier looked half dead from the heat. The coffee machine was broken, so I had to wait while he made a fresh pot. By the time I stepped back outside, coffee in hand, the car was gone. At first, I thought maybe they had just moved to another pump. But then I saw it, their beat-up old Camry pulling onto the highway, taillights shrinking into the distance. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Denise. "Let's see how long it takes you to get home. Consider this a lesson in problem solving." Smiling face with smiling eyes. I stared at the screen. My hands felt cold, despite the scorching sun. I tried calling, straight to voicemail. Again and again. 20 minutes passed before another text came through. "Don't bother calling. Your father says you need to figure this out yourself. See you when you make it home." I stood there, gripping that stupid cup of coffee, my heart pounding. This wasn't the first time they'd done something like this. But this time, something inside me just broke. The moment I decided I was done. This wasn't even the worst thing they'd done to me. 2 years earlier, they locked me out of the house. February. Freezing cold. All because I got a C+ in chemistry. "Maybe a night in the cold will help you focus on your studies," Dad had said, shutting the door in my face like it was nothing. I spent that night shivering in the garage, curled up on the cement floor. In the morning, I had frostbite on my fingers, and they still had the audacity to be mad because I broke a window to get in. They made me pay for it with my McDonald's money. So no, this gas station stunt wasn't new. But something about standing there, watching the highway stretch endlessly ahead, coffee cooling in my hand, it changed me. I was done. Not just tired. Not just hurt. Done. I had about $140 saved from my summer job at the local pool. My backpack was still in the car, but I had my wallet, my iPod. That was all I needed. I walked back inside the gas station, the overhead lights flickering slightly. The old cashier barely looked up as I approached. "Hey," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Where's the nearest bus station?" He pointed down the road. "About 2 miles that way." His eyes flicked up to mine. "You okay, kid?" I nodded. "Yeah, just need to make a call first." And I did. I called Aunt Laura, Denise's older sister, the one my parents had cut off years ago because she enabled bad behavior. Her crime? Buying me a phone when they took mine away. She picked up on the second ring. "Travis." Her voice was sharp with concern. "What's wrong?" I exhaled shakily. "They left me." A pause. Then, furious, "They what?" I told her everything. She didn't hesitate. Didn't lecture me. Didn't question. She just said, "Where are you? I'm getting you out of there." Aunt Laura lived 4 states away, but that didn't stop her. She called a local taxi service and booked me a ride to the bus station. Then she bought me a ticket online. "Get here," she said. "We'll figure the rest out." My phone buzzed again. Another text from Denise. "Don't you dare call Laura. You better be walking home, young man. Your father is very disappointed. This attitude of yours needs to stop." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then slowly I hit block, turned off my phone, stepped outside, and walked away. I never looked back. The bus ride to a new life. The taxi smelled like cigarette smoke and old leather. The driver barely spoke, which was fine by me. I sat in the back, staring out the window as the gas station faded into the distance. My parents probably expected me to sit there for hours, maybe cry a little, maybe beg strangers for help before finally dragging myself home in shame. They had no idea I was never coming back. At the bus station, I handed over the ticket Aunt Laura bought me and found a seat near the window. The place was half empty, just a couple of tired-looking travelers, a woman wrangling a screaming toddler, and an old man mumbling to himself. I clutched my iPod like a lifeline, tried to steady my breathing. I expected my phone to start buzzing again. More texts, more guilt trips, more lessons in responsibility, but stayed silent because I had turned it off. For the first time in my life, I had control over who got to reach me. The bus pulled out of the station, and I watched the world blur past. Small towns, cracked roads, fields stretching into nothing. With every mile, I felt lighter. They were going to be furious when they realized I wasn't coming home. I wondered how long it would take. I imagined them pulling into the driveway, expecting to see me sitting on the porch like a scolded dog. I pictured Dad storming inside, expecting to hear me shuffling around in my room, sulking. I wondered if they'd laugh at first. "Oh, he's being dramatic." Then maybe an hour would pass. 2. Then Denise's laughter would falter. "Gerald, what if he's not coming back?" I smiled to myself. For once, they were the ones left waiting. I didn't sleep during the 6-hour ride. I kept my eyes on the road, watching the sky shift from blue to orange to black. Every time we stopped to pick up passengers, my stomach twisted. Some small part of me expected to see Dad standing there, furious and red-faced, demanding I come home. But he never came. By the time we crossed into Aunt Laura's state, I had made my decision. I wasn't just running away. I was erasing them. They weren't my family anymore. They were just 2 people who left a kid at a gas station and thought it was funny. The aftermath and their realization. By the time the bus pulled into the station, my legs were stiff, my eyes dry, and my chest felt like a hollowed-out shell. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't scared of what came next. Aunt Laura was already waiting for me. The moment she saw me step off that bus, she rushed forward, pulling me into the kind of hug I hadn't felt in years. Warm, steady, safe. She didn't say anything at first, just held on, like she was afraid I might disappear. And maybe, in a way, I had been disappearing for years. Finally, she pulled back and looked me over, her expression darkening. "You look exhausted," she said. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. She put a firm hand on my shoulder. "Come on, kid. Let's get you home." That night, I slept in a real bed. No fear of being woken up for some twisted lesson. No anxiety that I'd done something wrong without realizing it. And in the morning, Aunt Laura handed me a plate of pancakes, sat across from me at the kitchen table, and said, "Now, tell me everything." So I did. I told her about the gas station, the texts, the voicemail. I told her about the years of lessons, the 3 a.m. wake-ups, the nights locked outside, the punishments that never fit the so-called crimes. She listened, didn't interrupt, didn't tell me I was overreacting. She just listened, and when I finished, she let out a long breath. "I should have done something years ago," she said, voice thick with regret. I shrugged. "You tried. That's why they cut you off." Her eyes hardened. "Well, they don't get to decide that anymore." Then she stood up, walked to the counter, and picked up her phone. "What are you doing?" I asked. She looked at me, expression unreadable. "Calling a lawyer." When they realized I was gone. Back at home, my parents were spiraling. At first, they thought I'd show up by morning. They probably went to bed laughing about how valuable this little lesson would be for me. Then morning came. and I wasn't there. They drove back to the gas station, fully expecting to find me sulking near the pumps. When they didn't, they started calling every friend they thought I had. Except, of course, they'd spent years isolating me, making sure I had no one to turn to. By the time they got home, reality had started to sink in. I was gone. And then, I imagine panic set in. Not because they missed me, not because they loved me, but because they realized how this might look. That's when they filed the missing persons report. Too bad for them. Aunt Laura had already started the paperwork for something else. Emancipation. The police came knocking on her door a few days later. I sat on the couch, heart pounding, as she opened the door, calm as ever. "Ma'am," one officer said, "we receive a report about a missing teenager. Your nephew, Travis." "He's not missing," Aunt Laura interrupted. Then she handed them a folder. "He's here, and he's not going back." The officer flipped through the papers. Their eyes flicked to me. "Is this true, son? You don't want to return home?" I swallowed hard. "No, I don't." They asked me a few more questions, mostly just confirming that I wasn't in any danger here, that I was here by choice, that I understood what emancipation meant. And then they left. Just like that, Gerald and Denise lost whatever grip they thought they had on me. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Because they would find me again years later. And when they did, they would regret it. Building a life without them. After the police left, it was like my whole world shifted. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving, I was free. Aunt Laura helped me get my GED, and from there, I threw myself into anything that would keep me moving forward. I worked odd jobs, fixing things, learning skills, figuring out how to stand on my own 2 feet. At first, I kept expecting my parents to show up. I'd flinch every time the doorbell rang, half waiting for Dad's booming voice or Mom's fake tears. But they never came. Aunt Laura did her best to help me heal, but some scars don't fade easily. I had spent so many years being conditioned to think I was less important, less worthy, less deserving of kindness, that it took a long time to believe otherwise. But little by little, I started to rebuild myself. By the time I was 19, I had a steady job working in construction. Turns out I was good at fixing things, not just physically, but in general. If something was broken, I could figure out how to put it back together. By 22, I had started my own business. By 26, I had built something real, something that was mine. And by 30, I had a family of my own. A wife who didn't believe in cruel lessons. Kids who would never have to question if their parents loved them. For 20 years, my life was peaceful, quiet. No surprise phone calls, no guilt trips, no manipulation. Gerald and Denise were nothing but a bad memory. A cautionary tale I told myself when I needed a reminder of how not to treat the people I loved. Then, one morning, everything changed. Because they found me. The 39 missed calls. It started with my office phone ringing. I don't answer unknown numbers, especially not during meetings, so I let it go to voicemail. Then my cell phone started buzzing, and buzzing, and buzzing. By the time I stepped out of the boardroom, I had 39 missed calls. Most of them were from numbers I didn't recognize. But three were from my sister, Valerie. I hadn't spoken to her in 20 years. My stomach twisted as I pressed play on the first voicemail. Through static and muffled sobs, I heard her voice. "Travis, please. Pick up. Mom and Dad found you. They're spiraling. Just please. Call me back." Not them. Me. I stood there, phone in hand as my coffee went cold. The next voicemail was my mother's voice, syrupy sweet, the way it always got when she was trying to manipulate me. "Travis, sweetheart. It's Mom. Please call us. We've been looking for you for so long. We miss you. Family is forever, honey." Then came the final voicemail. My father, slurring his words, voice thick with resentment. "You think you're better than us, huh? With your fancy business, your big shot life. We made you. You owe us." I exhaled slowly, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles ached. They didn't find me because they missed me. They found me because they needed something. I closed my eyes, steadying my breathing. Then I typed out a single text to Valerie. "Meeting tomorrow. Denny's on 5th, 7 a.m. Come alone, or don't come." Then I blocked every other number. Let them wait for once. The truth comes out. The next morning, I arrived at Denny's early. I sat in a booth near the window, stirring a cup of coffee that I wasn't really planning to drink. I wasn't sure if Valerie would show. 20 years was a long time. The last time I saw her, she was in college, still half under our parents' spell. Still believing that tough love was just love. At exactly 7:04 a.m., the door chimed, and there she was. She looked the same. Older, sure, but still Valerie. Same nervous habit of shredding napkins between her fingers, same way her eyes darted around like she was waiting for something bad to happen. She spotted me and hesitated. Then she walked over, sliding into the booth across from me. "Hey," she said. "Hey." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, before I could even ask, she blurted it out. "They're losing the house." I didn't react. I just sat back, waiting for her to continue. She exhaled shakily. "Dad's been gambling. Mom's maxed out all their credit cards. They're 3 months behind on the mortgage, and the bank started foreclosure. That's why they found you, Travis. They need money." There it was. The real reason behind the 39 missed calls. I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting the silence stretch between us. Valerie swallowed hard. "Dad, he thinks you owe them. That you wouldn't have made it if it weren't for them. And Mom, she's desperate. They're both desperate. Why help them?" I asked finally. "After everything they did to us?" She flinched. "They're still our parents." I set my cup down, staring at her. "No, Valerie. They stopped being parents when they left me at that gas station and laughed about it. The difference between you and me? You're still hoping they'll change." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't argue. My phone buzzed on the table. "Mom calling." I declined the call, pulled out my wallet, and tossed a 20 onto the table. "I'm paying for breakfast," I said. "Block my number after this. Whatever they do next, don't call me." "Travis, please." "I mean it." I stood up, grabbed my jacket, and walked out without looking back. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong, because as I was halfway to my truck, Valerie ran after me, breathless. "They're coming to your office," she gasped. "Tomorrow morning. Mom found your business address." I tried to stop them, I swear. I paused. Then I nodded, a slow smile curling at the edges of my mouth. "Good," I said. "Let them come." They walked into my office, thinking they had power. The next morning, I was ready. I had spent the last 24 hours making calls of my own. Turns out, the bank that owned my parents' mortgage? A bank I had worked with before. By the time Gerald and Denise walked through my office doors, everything was already in motion. I watched from behind my glass desk as they entered. Older now, worn down, but still carrying themselves with that same entitlement. Mom was the first to break. The moment she saw me, her face crumpled, and she burst into theatrical sobs. "My baby boy, look at you. You've grown so much." She reached for me like she expected a tearful reunion, like she hadn't spent the last 2 decades pretending I didn't exist. I stepped back before she could touch me. "Let's keep this professional," I said, gesturing to the chairs. "What do you want?" Dad puffed up his chest, trying to play the authority figure like he always did. "Now, son, is that any way to talk to your parents?" I folded my arms. "You didn't spend 20 years looking for me because you missed me. You found me now because you need something. So let's not waste time. What do you want?" Mom dabbed at fake tears. "We made a mistake, sweetheart. A silly mistake." I laughed. A sharp, bitter sound. "A mistake? You left your 16-year-old kid at a gas station as a joke. And when I didn't come home, you didn't even look for me until it was convenient for you. That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice." Dad's face darkened. "We did come back for you," he snapped, standing up. "An hour later. But you were gone." "Yeah," I said, my voice ice cold. "I was. And I stayed gone. Best decision I ever made." I pulled out my phone and hit record. Mom's expression faltered. "Travis, honey, state your business," I said flatly, "or leave." And that's when they dropped the act. Dad's face twisted with anger as he slammed a hand on my desk. "We need $175,000 to save the house." I let the number hang in the air for a moment. Then I leaned forward. "Funny you should mention the house," I said, reaching into my desk drawer and pulling out a folder. Because I hadn't just looked into their foreclosure. I had bought it. Mom's fake tears dried up instantly. Dad's bravado slipped. What?" Mom stammered. I slid the folder across the desk. "The mortgage was auctioned off last week." My company acquired it legally. I own the house now. Silence. A delicious, stretching silence. Dad's face went purple. You can't do this, he growled. Like hell I can't, I said, tilting my head. You have 30 days to vacate. After that, I'm demolishing it. Mom let out a raw, broken wail. This is our home. Like the gas station was my home. I asked, voice razor sharp. At least I'm giving you 30 days. You gave me 30 seconds. Dad lunged across the desk, fists clenched, but before he could reach me, security rushed in. I had them on standby for this exact moment. As they dragged my parents out, Mom shrieked about how I was a heartless, ungrateful son. Dad screamed about lawsuits. I just watched. Calm, steady, untouched. My phone buzzed. A text for Valerie. They just called me crying. What did you do? I typed back. What they taught me to do. I looked out for myself. Then I blocked her number, too. The house comes down, and so do they. The morning of the demolition, I woke up early. Not because I was anxious. Not because I was second-guessing myself. But because I wanted to savor this. For 20 years, Gerald and Denise had been nothing but a ghost in my past. A shadow I had outrun. But now I was their shadow. The weight pressing down on them. The consequence they never saw coming. I arrived at the property just before 7 a.m., coffee in hand, lawn chairs set up in the perfect spot. They were already there. Mom was pacing in the front yard, looking frazzled, hair undone for the first time in her life. Dad stood next to her, arms crossed, face tight with rage. They thought they could stop this. They were wrong. At exactly 7:15, the demolition crew arrived. That's when they realized this wasn't a bluff. This was happening. The first crack of the wrecking ball against the roof sent Mom into hysterics. She screamed, clutching at Dad's shirt like he could do something, like he could magically undo the years of damage they had caused. But he couldn't. This was justice. The bulldozers moved in next, tearing through the foundation, the walls, the memories they had built inside that house. And as it collapsed, I took a slow sip of my coffee, watching. No regret, no sadness, just relief. It was poetic, really. They had abandoned their son like he was nothing. And now, they were watching as everything they built came crumbling down. Mom fell to her knees, wailing about her garden, her precious roses, the ones she always cared about more than me. Dad stood frozen, fists clenched, helpless for the first time in his life. This time, they had no control. This time, it wasn't a lesson for me. It was a lesson for them. As the last of the house caved in, I stood up, dusted off my hands, and turned to leave. But before I got to my truck, someone stopped me. Mrs. Henderson, my parents' old neighbor. The woman who used to watch me from her porch, her eyes filled with something close to guilt. She walked up to me, voice soft. I should have called CPS back then, she said. I should have done something. I met her gaze, steady. It's okay, I said. I handled it. She nodded slowly. Yeah, I can see that now. Then she hugged me. Not the way my mother used to, a performance, a manipulation, but real. Warm, like family. And for the first time in years, I let myself lean into it. The final nail in their coffin. That should have been the end of it. But my parents, they don't know when to quit. That afternoon, I got a call for Valerie. I almost ignored it, but something told me to pick up. They're at a motel, she said, voice tired. Crying to anyone who will listen. Saying they're homeless. Saying they'll sue you. I sighed. With what money, Valerie? She hesitated. They want you to take them in. I laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. Not happening. She didn't argue. Not this time. And just when I thought I had washed my hands of them for good, I saw it. A new voicemail from Mom. I debated deleting it without listening. But curiosity got the better of me. I pressed play. Travis, honey, we forgive you. We understand you're upset, but you don't have to prove anything. We're still your parents. And we know, deep down, you love us. We're willing to move past this if you just come and get us. We could be a family again. I smiled to myself. They still thought they had power. I hit reply. Gerald, Denise, you taught me something valuable all those years ago. How to take care of myself. And I did. Without you. Despite you. So no, I don't love you. I don't forgive you. And I'm not saving you. Then I ended the message with the same words they had texted me at that gas station all those years ago. Consider this a lesson in problem solving. Smiling face with smiling eyes. Then I blocked their number. For good. A legacy worth leaving. That was it. No more guilt. No more fear. No more weight on my shoulders. I spent 20 years trying to escape them. But in the end, I didn't just escape. I erased them. The land where their house once stood, it's already being rebuilt. Not for a luxury development. Not for another family like them. For affordable housing. 20 units. Reasonable rent. Priority given to single parents and their kids. The kind of families that actually deserve help. And the best part? I named the complex after the only real family I ever had. Laura Haven. After the woman who gave me a home while my parents threw me away. She passed last year, but I know she would have loved it. Mom and Dad tried to rally the neighbors against me. They showed them childhood photos, sob about their ungrateful son. But those neighbors? They remembered. They remember my bruises. They remembered hearing me cry at night. They remembered exactly who my parents really were. And now, they have nothing. No house. No sympathy. No control. All they have left is each other. And for once, I'm the one who gets to leave them behind. Final thoughts. For years, I imagined revenge. I dreamed about dramatic confrontations, about screaming matches, about making them suffer. But in the end, the best revenge wasn't anger. It was success. They spent their whole lives trying to break me, and all they did was teach me how to live without them. I'm free, and I'll never look back. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe for more real-life family dramas. Let me know in the comments what you think about today's story. Was it fair or totally messed up? See you in the next one.